Are you ready for the biggest and craziest episode that you're about to hear in this podcast? Alright then, let's get things started! Hello everybody and welcome to the Animation Podcast, a weekly podcast about all things animation brought to you by FilmBook. My name is Matt Brunet, but some of you may know me as AniMat from my YouTube channel, Electric Dragon 505, home of web series that are all about animation, including Animation Look Back and AniMat's Reviews. If this is your first time here in the Animation Podcast, well, my god, dude, you came in for one heck of an episode because I got a whole bunch of big stories right here for you today, and you could probably guess by the length of this episode, we got some big stories for you today, and I have a lot to say about them. And in this one, we got a whole bunch of trailers, we got a whole bunch of big news stories, and of course, we got a whole bunch of awards to talk about right over here. So in this episode in particular, I'm going to start things off by looking into two teaser trailers of two big Disney movies that are going to be coming out this year. Then afterwards, we will be looking into our first official trailer to The Grinch by Illumination Entertainment. Then afterwards, we will be paying our respects to a beloved actor in animation, David Ogden Stiers. Then afterwards, we will be talking about a new chapter that's coming into Cartoon Network. And then finally, we got what could possibly be, at least so far, the biggest AniMat's pick of the week. If you want to check out more episodes of the Animation Podcast, then all you have to do is head on down to FilmBook, which is film-book.com, by searching the Animation Podcast. You can also email us at podcast@filmbook.com with the Animation Podcast in the subject line. And so, for our first story right over here, we are going to begin the Animation Podcast by looking into a couple of teaser trailers for some live-action films. Yes, I know it's a little bit backwards considering this is something that is literally called the Animation Podcast, but there is a good reason why I would go ahead and talk about them, because technically, these are two teaser trailers for something that is part sequel and part Disney live-action remake. And what I'm talking about, of course, is going to be for Disney Christopher Robin and Mary Poppins Returns. I know technically some people might argue that Mary Poppins might not technically count in the Disney live-action remakes, but technically, if we would count Pete's Dragon, then I think we can also count Mary Poppins as well. But anyways, as I was saying, this week we actually got these two trailers not too far from each other. We started off with Mary Poppins, in which it made its premiere during the Academy Awards. And then a couple of days later, we got our first ever look into Disney Christopher Robin. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of the reverse. I'm going to start things off by talking about Christopher Robin, then afterwards look into Mary Poppins Returns. Okay, so our first one, we got Disney Christopher Robin. And in the trailer that we got right over here, we are pretty much going back in time to the beginning of the 20th century, where we see Christopher Robin now is all grown up and played by Ewan McGregor, and he's very busy at work, and apparently he has to work during the weekend where he has to do his business and stuff like that. But it is a bit disappointing because he promised his family that he would go out on the weekend, go for a picnic and stuff like that, you know, spend his time with his wife and his daughter. But unfortunately, because of his job, that cannot really happen. So now Christopher Robin is in this major dilemma when suddenly, right out of the blue in the middle of his work, or like when he's just sitting in a bench in the middle of a park, who would come in than his old friend, someone that he has never seen for years, Winnie the Pooh himself. And from there, the trailer would just end off with a little interaction between the old Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh. Now, interestingly enough, this trailer actually did get a little bit viral, but for several weird reasons. I mean, technically, yes, it did get pretty popular for the reasons that it wants to be, is to go and capture people's childhoods, to capture people's nostalgia for Winnie the Pooh, and seeing what some people might consider a tear-jerking moment where we do see the reunion of an old Christopher Robin reunited with the silly old bear himself, Winnie the Pooh, which normally we're just way too used to nowadays, seeing Christopher Robin as a toddler boy in the 100-Acre Woods interacting with Pooh in the game. But now we see this interaction, and some people might feel like, oh my god, the feels, like how times have changed, that now Christopher Robin is all grown up, and technically I'm all grown up too, so I can relate to Christopher Robin, and all of that kind of stuff. So it does try to capture that little moment, and in a way, it does work for some people. But then there's another reason why it got popular, and maybe not for the reasons that it was expecting, and that is actually because of Winnie the Pooh himself. And funny enough, many people were freaked out when they saw Winnie the Pooh. Like, they saw him in a way that is kind of frightening, and maybe it was because of, like, the soulless design of how they literally made him into a living stuffed animal. It's almost as if Winnie the Pooh just came in front of Christopher Robin going, "Christopher Robin, now that your family is out of the way, I will be your angel of death. It is time for you to accept your fate." And yeah, like, people thought that Winnie the Pooh was kind of like a frightening figure, and it kind of became a little bit of a meme in a sense. But honestly, for me, I feel like there really isn't much to complain about. But at the same time, I do understand why people would be freaked out about this, because this is more of a scenario of a be careful what you wish for kind of sense. Because the thing is, Winnie the Pooh has always been to be designed as a living stuffed animal. This has not only been like this since the days of the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh, this has not only been like that since the days when Walt Disney was supervising some of the Winnie the Pooh cartoons. This was also during the time of the A.A. Milne stories. Like, nothing has changed during that moment. Pooh has always been a living stuffed animal, and in the past, we've always seen him drawn as this cute, simple-looking character, where the style has been more simplified, and we're more accustomed to it. But in here, we see all the details. Now we see Pooh with legitimate fur, with legitimate stitchings, with legitimate fabric onto him. And on top of that, they do keep the same designs onto him, where he does have, like, the 2 dots for his eyes. And yeah, in a way, it does give a bit of that soulless approach. That's why a lot of people kind of got freaked out when they looked at Winnie the Pooh. Like, he is coming to life, but you don't really see a soul within him. Like, even though you can hear Jim Cummings' voice projecting out of Pooh to bring out that sense of familiarity, and yeah, it is kind of effective. But in here, like, the look of Pooh, it really is the kind, like I said before, it's just be careful what you wish for, because if you want a live-action remake of Winnie the Pooh, then that's exactly what it's going to look like. And be lucky that you only see Pooh right now. Like, if you're freaked out by looking at Winnie the Pooh right over here, then you might not want to know what does Eeyore or Tigger or Piglet, like what those characters would look like. Then you would probably be way too uncomfortable and way too freaked out, or probably feel like Ewan McGregor, like he's just sitting there going, "Have I gone cracked?" or "Have I cracked or something?" No, maybe you got a few wrinkles, but wait until the rigor mortis would kick in. But yeah, honestly, for me, this does feel like many of the other Winnie the Pooh shorts. I'm not going to be expecting too much out of this, but it does feel like it could capture some of that charm. Again, keep in mind that what I'm talking about here are just teaser trailers, and what they're offering are just teasers, and that's pretty much it. So what we will see right over here, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe it's going to work with Christopher Robin, maybe it won't, but honestly, from what I'm seeing, it does show a little bit of promise. Maybe there could be something that's going to be cute and charming. But then again, there is also one thing that I have to criticize about, and this is something that I have said before regarding hearing the plot of Disney Christopher Robin, And I don't know if anybody got that feeling, but am I the only one that feels like Christopher Robin is starting to look more and more and more like Hook? Like, you know what I mean, the Robin Williams movie? Like, I'm just seeing very similar story scenarios right over here. And especially the trailer, we're starting to see so many big parallels between Ewan McGregor as Christopher Robin and Robin Williams as Peter Pan, where they would start out as, they start out as children's icons from the beginning of the 20th century with, like, Christopher Robin and Peter Pan, but now they're all grown up, and they're very busy people, like, they're pretty much workaholics, and, like, their nose is always on work, and it's kind of a curse as well, because that means they don't really have much time for their family, and part of the goal for the main character is to go find some actual time where they need to sacrifice some work in order to actually go and spend some time with some loved ones. I just can't help but feel like there are some strong parallels over here. And with Christopher Robin, that could probably be a big flaw that could bite itself in the butt, where it would probably take a little too much from Hook. But instead of making it an entire Peter Pan motif, they're just going with an entire Winnie the Pooh motif. Hopefully, when Christopher Robin goes into the 100 Acre Woods, we could actually see something a little bit different than what we were accustomed to with Hook and stuff like that. So that's one thing that I do hope that it tries to avoid, that it doesn't take too much from Hook. But again, it could be something that, if executed well, then they might capture something that could be timeless, and it might be something that Winnie the Pooh fans will absolutely adore. Like, they won't see it the same way like how Sleeping Beauty fans would see Maleficent, or how Beauty and the Beast fans saw the 2017 live-action remake. You know, this could be a good new addition to the big canon of the Disney Winnie the Pooh franchise. But then, you also got Mary Poppins Returns. This is the long-awaited sequel to, of course, the Walt Disney classic Mary Poppins. And with this one right over here, debatably, Disney would have to be very careful with crafting this movie right over here, more so than Disney Christopher Robin, because in a way, you could argue that now that Disney is actually doing something with Mary Poppins, they are entering upon sacred territory. This is the movie in which many people refer it to as the greatest feature film, the greatest live-action feature film ever produced by Walt Disney himself. A movie that received several Oscar nominations and even some wins, including Julie Andrews getting Best Actress. And now they're gonna give it the live-action treatment in the same way that Pete's Dragon kind of got it with this one right over here with Mary Poppins Returns, except instead of making it an actual, like, reboot or remake, they are doing a legitimate sequel. And what we got in this teaser trailer right over here is that it's showing us that it's gonna go and pick things up where it kind of left off in the original. Not immediately, of course, it's going to be set a few years later, where Jane and Michael are all grown up. But in here, we do see the familiar kite that we saw at the end of the movie, and kind of like a big symbolism in the original feature film, where we see it flying around, and we also got our first major look of Lin-Manuel Miranda's character. And from there, we see the kite just flying around, and then we see a boy who picks up this kite and just plays around with it. And then suddenly we see Lin-Manuel Miranda and the kid just, like, playing with the kite during a storm. And it was getting a little bit more dangerous because the kite was almost flying away. And at the last minute, here comes Mary Poppins holding the kite, just coming down like she is well known for. And then right at the end, like after we see the title of Disney Mary Poppins Returns, we actually see the grown-up version of Jane and Michael and Mary Poppins interacting with herself. And holy crap, just looking at this, it's honestly something that I actually do get a feeling that this could actually work out a lot more than Christopher Robin. I'm not saying that Christopher Robin is going to fail, but like when I see this teaser trailer of Mary Poppins Returns, this one actually gives me something to be a lot more excited about, because so far from what we're seeing in the teaser trailer, they actually do get the tone correct. Like, we do get the same feeling of Mary Poppins, and we also see a bit of the same look of Mary Poppins from the original 1964 movie. And for the most part, like, even though, again, this is just a teaser trailer, we don't really get to see a lot, you know, surprisingly enough, it did give some reassurance over some things that people might be worried about. Like, for example, when we see the new Mary Poppins, like, we do see a little bit of familiarity from the one that we saw played by Julie Andrews. So, overall, like, it's really hard to describe about, like, what's in Mary Poppins Returns, but so far, we could be seeing a legitimate sequel, something that will feel as timeless as the original Mary Poppins, and who knows, maybe they could actually get this one right. And, I mean, considering that Disney has a lot of recent success with Mary Poppins, not only with the original film, but also with the Broadway musical that was pretty successful during its time, maybe they could also get this one right. I mean, technically, like, I'm sure a lot of people had some worry, not just about, like, completely rebooting at the same time as making a sequel to Mary Poppins, but also the fact that it is coming from the director of Into the Woods, trying to give the same treatment as he did to that movie. But honestly, from what I see in the trailer, this could be something that, if it works out well, then this could work out tremendously. Like, Disney would be really reaping in the rewards for this one, debatably almost as much as the original Mary Poppins herself. So honestly, this one I feel a lot more excited about, where I think when it comes to these two teaser trailers, with Disney Christopher Robin, I could see where it can work, but I can also see where it can fail. But with Mary Poppins Returns, I feel like I could see a lot of what can work. That's kind of the main thing that I am focusing on. Like, maybe there is a possibility that it couldn't work, but from what they're seeing in the teaser trailer, it is very promising. And I think I'm a lot more excited for Mary Poppins Returns than I am with Disney Christopher Robin. I will go ahead and still see them both, and, you know, I am still hoping for the best, that maybe they could bring out something that could be timeless. But yeah, it is kind of a massive coincidence, though, that we did receive two teaser trailers, in which they both act as not just live-action remakes of a Disney classic, but also a sequel, like a follow-up to the stories that we've grown up with. And yeah, honestly, they could work out well. Now, they are both coming out this year, where Disney Christopher Robin is going to be coming out later this August, and Mary Poppins is going to be coming into theaters right at the end of 2015 during Christmas. Now, for our next story, we actually got another trailer for you guys. Yes, on top of the Disney live-action teaser trailers that we got, we also have a new trailer for an animated feature. And this time, it's going to be from Illumination Entertainment, The Grinch, the upcoming adaptation to the beloved Dr. Seuss book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And with this one, it's actually very interesting, because technically, this would be our first official look, but not the first time that we've seen anything from this adaptation of The Grinch, because if you may remember, about a month ago, during the start of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, we actually got our first look of The Grinch in the form of a little promo commercial, where we just see the Grinch and he's just watching this little promo thing for the Olympics, or he's just watching the Olympics in general on his couch, watching TV and stuff like that. And then suddenly he would imagine himself as a figure skater. And then he would go and like just imagine himself thinking that he won the gold and suddenly woke up by Max and stuff like that. So that was pretty much it with our first look in there. But now we received our official first look with the Grinch, where the main aspect that they are trying to sell with this Grinch is the fact that he's just a miserable curmudgeon, where he's just a guy that is never happy with his life, and his life is surrounded with just being miserable. And when he would actually go into Whoville, his mission is to make sure that everybody is miserable in general. Now, interestingly enough, in this trailer right over here, we don't actually see elements from the original book. Like, we don't see some parts of the storyline, but we do see just Grinch on his daily life, where we would see his morning routine, and we would also see him going out grocery shopping, where he's at the store causing a little bit of mischief and a bit of chaos at the same time. And that's all that we got with this version of the Grinch. So technically, yes, this is another teaser trailer on top of what we got with Christopher Robin and Mary Poppins. But before I continue into my thoughts onto this teaser trailer, I just want to say that I've already expressed this a lot before, but really, I do not see the point of this film at all. Like, I don't see the reason why we need another adaptation of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, because we already got our fill of what this movie wants to deliver. An animated Grinch? Well, we already got the animated TV special by Chuck Jones. A movie of the Grinch? We already got a Grinch movie by Ron Howard and starring Jim Carrey. So really, I don't see the point of having another Grinch movie, especially when it's coming from Illumination Entertainment. Now, as much as I do defend Illumination Entertainment and I do give them credit, the thing with Illumination is that I don't really trust them with them actually working on a Dr. Seuss project, especially after The Lorax, and that film really turned out like crap. Now, I will give it credit that it did have some really beautiful animation, and that's probably the best thing about that film, is that it did capture the look of Dr. Seuss, but the script was absolutely freaking garbage, and the songs are so freaking cringeworthy. So really, it's hard to really trust this film. The fact that we got another Grinch adaptation from the people that made The Lorax. So really, Illumination would have to do a whole lot to really impress me and to try to reel me into actually considering to, well, not really check out the Grinch, because I still have to do it for reviewing purposes, but to really make me go and, try to enchant me, to really, try to make it appealing to me. You know what I mean? So, looking at this teaser trailer, I will say that so far, it does look better than I would think. I will give it credit that the execution is pretty good so far, but I wouldn't say that it's getting me excited. It's not getting me anticipated. It's not getting me up to it. I think the best way to say it, I for a while I've been trying to find the right word to say how I feel, but it's hard for Illumination to make me feel optimistic about this movie. I think that's the best way to put it. And so far from what I've seen, I do see some promise. And I think, the best thing about this trailer is actually regarding its execution. Now, we don't, like I said before, we don't really see much of the story. We don't really see much of what would be the plot in this interpretation of the Grinch. It's just the Grinch actually going through his daily life. And what we do see, it does have some pretty good gags related to the misery of the Grinch, especially where we see at the beginning when he would wake up by the alarm clock with the song Happy, and he's just sick and tired of that song, trying to stop the clock regardless Like, that was cute and funny. And also, one part that did actually make me laugh is when the Grinch actually does go into the grocery store, just being a dick to everyone. And even the part, like, when he tries a pickle, didn't like it, and just puts it in someone else's basket. That was actually pretty funny. I will give it credit for that. And what's actually pretty interesting, though, is that, yeah, the execution is funny. You know, it is pretty good, and it does show some promise. But what's actually very interesting to note here is that it does feel a lot more Illumination than it does Dr. Seuss. In fact, for some reason, this movie looks a lot more Illumination than Dr. Seuss than what we got with, what was the movie? With The Lorax. And honestly, it is quite surprising because I'm actually quite surprised that they are going back to their own style more so than actually keeping with the spirit of Dr. Seuss, kind of like what they did with The Lorax. So I don't know what went with that direction, but you do see the elements, like especially I think the most Illumination looking character that we saw, like technically with some of the Who's, they do look like regular people. And, well, the regular people that we saw, like, in the Despicable Me films and stuff like that. And then we also, like, Max. Max, I feel like he looks like a character that just came... He just came straight out of The Secret Life of Pets. And so, with the Grinch, but probably, the most Illumination thing that I've seen in this trailer is probably with the character of the Grinch himself. I don't know if anybody got that feeling, but honestly, when I would see the Grinch going out causing his evil mischief, I get the strong feeling that he's pretty much acting exactly like Gru. Specifically, he's acting like Gru at the beginning of the first Despicable Me movie, like before Gru would meet up with the girls. Because you could definitely see Gru doing all these things very similar to what the Grinch has done, like in the grocery store, where like he would go and pick up this jar of jam, and like the woman would want, like a short woman would want it, but then he would just put it back up to the high shelf. Like he would do stuff like that. And honestly, it does have that air of Illumination. And I'm sure, like, the execution could work out, but I'm sure that diehard Grinch fans might not feel like that is a bit... Like, they won't feel that it would feel welcoming for them, that they're going a little bit away from the original Grinch just so they can do some of the stuff that they would normally do in, like, the Despicable Me films. And in a way, I could see where they could go with it, because technically it could be an excuse to actually do some gags to do some gags that they want to do for the Grinch that they can no longer do with Gru anymore, because let's be honest, Gru has kind of changed ever since the first Despicable Me film. But then again, they could probably save it for when Minions 2 would come out if Gru actually does appear in that movie. But with all that said and done, there is also one good thing that I can mention about it, is that I really do like the backgrounds of the animation. There are some elements into the animation that I do find that's actually pretty impressive. But specifically, it's actually regarding the layouts, especially with the cave of the Grinch, where, like, the opening shot where we pretty much travel all the way up into the cave, and then we go see the Grinch. And then afterwards, when we see the Grinch coming out of the cave, and then we see the entirety of Whoville itself, I will admit, it does look pretty. It does look pretty nice. But I will say, though, that when it comes to the characters, they do look a little bit more generic, like they would in any of the other Illumination films, more so than something like... something that would come out of a Dr. Seuss story. They do, like, the Who's just look like they had a bit of a, like, they just have a different nose, but if you just switch the nose to a regular human nose, then they would fit in very well in a Despicable Me movie or in something like The Secret Life of Pets. So that's pretty much what we got with Illumination's The Grinch, where we got a lot more Illumination than Dr. Seuss. But I will say, though, that what I'm expecting from this after seeing the trailer is that I don't think we're gonna get like one of the best movies of the year. I don't even think this could even come out as one of Illumination's best, but I would say that at best, this could come out as an enjoyable movie. This could come out something that I could get some laughs out of it. Maybe it won't be the most memorable Grinch adaptation. Like, honestly, at this point, it feels pretty impossible that this would even replace either the Chuck Jones special or even the Ron Howard movie. Like, maybe, like, at best, it could even do better than what the Ron Howard movie did, but who knows? We'll just probably have to wait and see with what happens. And if you guys are anticipating for the Grinch and see what Illumination has in store for it, then all you have to do is just wait until November of this year for the Grinch to come back in theaters. Now, for our next story that we have right over here, sadly, we got another person who has passed away. If you guys remember in the last episode of the animation podcast, and you may recall that I talked about the unfortunate passing of Pixar animator and character designer and voice actor as well, Bud Luckey. And sadly, we got another person who is very significant in animation who is sadly no longer with us. However, this person is not really an animator, but he's a very prominent actor, and a very talented one at that as well. An actor of stage, screen, and voice. I am, of course, talking about David Ogden Stiers. David Ogden Stiers passed away last week at the age of 75 in his battle with bladder cancer, which was confirmed by his agent, Mitchell K. Stubbs. Now, when you would go and look around for an article talking about the passing of David Ogden Stiers, what they will mention the most, and probably the biggest highlight, would be his role as Major Charles Emerson Winchester III in the hit 70s series MASH, in which he actually did get 2 Emmy nominations for. However, what people may remember David Ogden Stiers the most is actually his roles in Disney films, because throughout the 90s and a little bit in the start of the 2000s, David Ogden Stiers was actually a pretty prominent voice for some Disney films, and even at one point, John Lasseter himself even called David Ogden Stiers Disney's Lucky Charm, in the same way how John Ratzenberger is to Pixar. And he has done a lot of great memorable roles in a lot of Disney animated films, and his first one would probably be his most famous role that he has ever done for a Disney movie. And what I'm talking, of course, is the role of Cogsworth, and also the narrator for the 1991 Disney animated masterpiece, Beauty and the Beast, where not only he would play Cogsworth, but like I said, he also did the narrator at the beginning when he would tell the story about how is it that the Beast ultimately became a beast, how he went from this bratty little prince into a hideous monster, and would say the ultimate line for who could ever love a beast. And then right afterwards, he would also appear in Disney's Pocahontas, where not only he would play the villain, Governor Radcliffe, but also play his assistant, Wiggins. And then afterwards, he would also be the voice of the Archdeacon in Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame. Then afterwards, jumping into the early 2000s, he would play the voice of Fenton Q. Harcourt in Atlantis Lost Empire. And finally, he would also be the voice of Jumba from Lilo and Stitch. However, it is not just at Disney where he would go out and lend his voice in a prominent way. He also did some voices for a few Studio Ghibli films, some of which are actually directed by Hayao Miyazaki himself, where he actually did the English dubs of them. He did the voice of the narrator for My Neighbor the Yamadas. He also was the voice of Grandpa Piccolo for Porco Rosso, and probably the biggest role that he has ever played in terms of what the movie is Kamaji in Spirited Away. Now, of course, David Ogden Stiers also did a lot of other voice acting roles where he was also the voice of Mr. Jolly in Teacher's Pet. He did the voice of Nicky Flippers in the Hoodwink movies. He was also once the Penguin in the direct-to-DVD movie Batman, Mystery of Batwoman, and he also did the voice of Mr. Millard in Regular Show. And this is on top of plenty of other projects that David Ogden Stiers have played. And what's actually very significant about David Ogden Stiers is that he is actually one of those actors that was really dedicated to playing the part of the character that he would play. It's not just in those particular movies that he would play in terms of his Disney characters like Cogsworth and Jumba, but he would also go ahead and play them in the direct-to-DVD sequels. He would also play them in the TV shows like in The House of Mouse, and he would even play them in the video games, including Kingdom Hearts, where he did both Cogsworth and Jumba. And not only that, but when it comes to the acting style of David Ogden Stiers himself, I do feel like this is the kind that he really does give out an air that he really is a master thespian. Like, not only the kind that can easily recite to you Shakespeare on the spot, but also the kind that he's a very versatile actor. He has a very, his voice really does have a wide range, and he really is talented enough to use it at his best. And there are some standout performances that I would like to point out. Now, of course, like Cogsworth, I mean, probably his most beloved role that he has ever played that many generations will adore. Not even Ian McKellen can really get up to the ranks of what David Ogden Stiers has done in the movie. But also, one standout performance I would like to mention is actually his role in Pocahontas, where not only he did Ratcliffe, but also he played Wiggins. And this is pretty much a role that is that's pretty much very similar to what Harry Shearer did, where he was both the voice of Mr. Burns and Smithers, where in here, David Ogden Stiers would have to play the villain and his assistant as well. And the voices, they are so different. And what I mean different, I mean the kind that, like, I would have never guessed if nobody told me that Radcliffe and Wiggins are both voiced by the same person, because these are very different. Even though, like, with Radcliffe, you could definitely hear the tone that it actually is David Ogden Stiers, like a little bit like how he delivered it with Cogsworth, but a little bit with a deeper voice. But then you also got Wiggins, who's a lot more different, that's just smooth, and the way that they both interact, it's very seamless, and he did a great job on that performance right there. But also there's another role that I would like to mention as well, and that is actually with the Archdeacon in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, technically, the Archdeacon isn't necessarily that big of a role in the movie. I mean, the Archdeacon only appears in a few scenes, and probably his biggest moment was at the opening when he has to confront Frollo of what he has done, basically killing off Quasimodo's mother. And in there, I think that's the one where you really do see David Ogden Stiers' singing voice, the one that is the most prominent. Maybe there is a live-action production that David Ogden Stiers really did sing out a lot more, but in terms of his animated projects, this is the one where you actually do hear the most in terms of the singing range from David Ogden Stiers. And yeah, he does have a pretty powerful singing voice. And not just that, but also a singing voice where he is capable of staying in character. That is actually pretty strong right over there. Now, I don't know how different the voice of the Archdeacon is from David Ogden Stiers' actual voice. Maybe it could make it easier if maybe it is easier if it actually is closer to his regular voice. but still, like, his singing chops are actually spot on when he played the Archdeacon in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And yeah, overall, when it comes to David Ogden Stiers, it really is pretty sad to hear when he passed away, because he is the kind of actor that many would look up to, and the kind of actor that he did a great job bringing these characters to life in a way that really does feel sophisticated, in a way that, like, he's pretty much your go-to pompous, like, pretty much your go-to pompous actor, or like your go-to like kind of like a grumpy old man in a way. And yeah, there are a lot of roles that I will remember him by, not just with Cogsworth, but also with Kamaji, or even as Nicky Flippers in the first Hoodwinked. Like, he actually did a good job in there as well. And hearing that he is no longer with us, it is actually pretty sad to hear. So this is definitely going to be an actor that I am going to miss, and definitely an actor that I'll definitely look up to with the vocal range and the delivery of his performance that he has done. He has done a beautiful job with many of these characters, and yeah, I think it's safe to say that David Ogden Stiers will surely be missed. Okay, so for our next story that we have right over here, we're going to be talking about Cartoon Network. And I think it is safe to say now that we're going to be entering upon a new age in the studio, where things are going to be looking a little bit more different, and we are going to be getting a whole bunch of brand new shows. Now, in 2018, at this point, we have already gotten some series including Apple and Onion, and we got the Lego Movie spin-off series, Unikitty. But that is only the beginning of what Cartoon Network wants to deliver, since apparently Cartoon Network has officially announced what is their biggest slate ever. Like, they are going to be delivering so many brand new cartoons and TV shows that are going to be coming out throughout 2018 and a little bit in 2019 as well, on top of bringing back some fan favorites. So let us go ahead and dive right into it and just start off with the new shows that are going to be coming. Now, I've already said that, like, we've already got Apple and Onion and Unikitty, but on top of that, we also have something that I've already mentioned before here in the animation podcast, Craig of the Creek, which is going to be brought to us by Steven Universe writers Matt Burnett and Ben Levin, where, taking from my source here in the Animation Magazine, where it states that Craig of the Creek follows the precocious Craig as he leads his best friends JP and Kelsey on comical journeys at the neighborhood creek, transforming everyday afternoons into thrilling expeditions through imaginative play. And that show is actually going to be coming out in a few weeks, actually, where it will be debuting on March 30th. And then after that, we also got a series called Summer Camp Island, where it says, in this wildly imaginative series based on an original Cartoon Network short created by Julia Pott, Summer Camp Island will unfold the mysteries that Oscar and his best friend Hedgehog encounter at a magical summer camp. And apparently the short that the series is based on is apparently a very popular and very big short as well, considering that it made its run throughout numerous of festivals, and one of the biggest ones that it appeared in is actually in the Sundance Film Festival. And the series itself is said that it will start things off, well, since it is Summer Camp Island, it will premiere during the summer. And then after that, we got Victor and Valentino, which is created by Diego Molano. And the series is said right over here that the supernatural adventure comedy follows two half-brothers who spend a summer with their grandma in Monte Macabre, a small and mysterious town where myths and legends of Latin America folklore come to life, which that one will be coming out a little bit later in 2018, which I'm expecting maybe during the fall time. And then we probably got the most anticipated of them all, which is Infinity Train, which is said here, with a groundswell of fan support of the original short created through the artist program. The mystery adventure created by Owen Dennis follows a precocious young girl named Tulip, who finds herself on a train full of infinite worlds and tries to find her way home. Which that one, like I said, is going to be coming out in 2019. Now, this is on top of brand new seasons and brand new episodes of what's already on Cartoon Network right now, which includes Adventure Time, Ben 10, OKKO, Let's Be Heroes, Steven Universe, The Amazing World of Gumball, The Powerpuff Girls, Teen Titans Go, We Bare Bears, Mighty Magic Sword, and Clarence, which those ones, on top of the new ones, will be coming out throughout 2018. And like I said before, just by looking at this, we can already tell that Cartoon Network is already entering upon a brand new age in its lineup, or a brand new age in terms of what the channel will be going. I mean, it's no longer the days where Adventure Time and Steven Universe were pretty much dominating the channel and got a massively huge fan base. In fact, shows like Adventure Time and Clarence are going to be ending off this year. So, considering that we are getting a whole bunch of new big shows like Craig of the Creek, Victor and Valentino, and Infinity Train coming up, you could tell that Cartoon Network is really going into a new direction. And one of the big controversies about Cartoon Network nowadays is actually regarding a schedule and how there is a little bit of a lack of variety, where there are days when they would mostly be focusing on one show throughout the week, and then they'll be focusing on another one and stuff like that. Which is also why a lot of people would give crap to some of the reboots of some of their shows, like Teen Titans Go and the Powerpuff Girls, because they would keep airing them all the time onto Cartoon Network. But now it seems like the channel is more dedicated to variety, because now they got a whole bunch of brand new shows that are going to be coming up, and they are going to be coming from brand new people. Like, they are making brand new cartoon stars out of it, and you know, they're not just relying on like some of their big names. Like, they're not just going to be focusing on like, okay, we're going to get a brand new series from Rebecca Sugar, we're going to get a brand new series from Penn Ward or stuff like that. Like, they are giving chances to new artists to become a big name for themselves, and maybe, you know, get, like become a new animation icon in their own right. And it's actually very fascinating to see that Cartoon Network would go in that direction, and actually pretty cool to see that, you know, we are seeing new artists coming into the way. And honestly, it is going to be interesting to see where this direction is going, and if these shows are going to be worth it. Honestly, it does sound pretty interesting. Like, the shows themselves, like, I've already talked about Craig and the Creek, and I could see how the humble humble simplicity of the series would actually get quite a fan base. And considering that it is from the writers of Steven Universe, they could pull something great out of it. Infinity Train, that does seem like something that, like, it could have a strong chance that it would be the next, like, Adventure Time or Steven Universe, where it's going to be, like, this big cult following where a lot of people are going to love it, and, like, it could be, like, Cartoon Network's next big show right over there. Summer Camp Island, honestly, that's the one where I'm not sure. Like, that one feels more like a mystery of how that could turn out, but considering that it was pretty big with its festival runs, maybe it'll have a chance to become a great big show. And also, Victor and Valentino, that one, I will say, does sound pretty interesting, because from the way that they're describing it, it's a little bit like they're making a Latin American version of Gravity Falls. At least that's what it sounds like a bit, considering that it is a supernatural adventure comedy, and you got two siblings entering into this mysterious town, and then, like, they see myths and legends just coming to life. In a way, you could say that it would be a little mix of what we got with Gravity Falls, and also another mix of what we got like with movies like Coco or The Book of Life, that they'll enter into that kind of territory. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how they'll deliver it. But yeah, honestly, you know, we are seeing Cartoon Network going into this new generation, and I wish the best of luck for these show creators to have their show come out, and hopefully it will be awesome and help strengthen Cartoon Network, and hopefully it'll make fanboys shut up about like complaining regarding their reboots and stuff like that. Hopefully that, if they can do that, then I think Cartoon Network will go into a great direction. But yeah, overall, it is pretty fascinating. So if you guys are interested in checking out the series, just remember that Craig of the Creek will be coming out on March 30th. Afterwards, you got Summer Camp Island for the summer, Victor and Valentino, which is going to be later in 2018, and then Infinity Train coming out in 2019. And so we shall now go ahead and end things off with AniMat's Pick of the Week. And while we did have fun talking about the latest news that happened in animation this week, let me just go ahead and ask you guys a little something. You didn't think that I would walk away in this episode without even mentioning about the biggest night in Hollywood, the Academy Awards. Yes, I decided to go ahead and save the biggest news story for last, which is about the 90th Annual Academy Awards and the winners that have been presented there. Now, for longtime viewers of my YouTube channel, you may recall that what I would do every year is that I would go and make a separate vlog on my channel where I would go and discuss about my thoughts on the entirety of the Oscars during that specific year. Like what I think about the winners, what I think about the animated winners, and also about the show itself. Well, I decided for this year I'm going to change things up a bit, and I'm actually going to go ahead and save it for here in the animation podcast. Now, there isn't really much of a difference between what I would normally do in the vlogs and what I'm about to do now. The only thing that will be different is just the way that I am presenting them right now. So, with all that said, what I'm about to do here is that I will be expressing my thoughts on 3 different things that happened during that night. I will start things off by talking about the animated winners, since this is the animation podcast. Then I will discuss about the other winners at the Oscars this year. And then finally, I will go ahead and talk about my thoughts on the show, like the whole presentation and all that kind of stuff, and all the weird, crazy events that did occur at the Oscars this year. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get things started and talk about the animated winners that occurred this year. And I'll start things off by talking about Best Animated Short. And this year, the big winner is Dear Basketball. Now, I have previously talked about this a lot in the animation podcast for those of you who would be longtime listeners of the show. And as you may know, one thing I always describe about Dear Basketball is that this is the combining forces of 3 masters of their own field. You got NBA All-Star Kobe Bryant bringing in his poem. You got master animator Glenn Keane, who has created some of the most memorable characters during the Disney Renaissance, like Aladdin, The Beast, Tarzan, and many more. And then you also got composing legend John Williams. Like, you got all of those 3 people bringing in John Williams' music, Glenn Keane's animation, and Kobe Bryant's poem, formed that, and you pretty much got Dear Basketball, which won for Best Animated Short. The other shorts that were nominated this year includes Garden Party, Pixar's Lou, Negative Space, and Revolting Rhymes. Now, this year, I will have to mention that for the animated shorts, it is actually very interesting because they each bring something very unique into the table animation-wise, at least in terms of their visuals. Like, for example, with Dear Basketball, you got the rough hand-drawn animation of Glenn Keane. And then when you look at Garden Party, that one would offer hyper-realistic CGI. Then you got Lou, and you got the creative uses of random objects in order to morph a character into different shapes. And then you also got Negative Space, which is more of a surreal use of stop motion. And then you got Revolting Rhymes, which is literally a children's storybook coming to life. Like, you take the classic illustrations that would be commonly used in Roald Dahl books, and they would go bring them to life, like animate them, turn them into computer animation, in order to go and form this creative and unique tale of Revolting Rhymes. And honestly, I am actually very glad that Dear Basketball actually won for Best Animated Short. For me personally, I was really rooting for either Lou or Dear Basketball to win. And I will say, as an animation fan, it's about time that Glenn Keane finally got a godforsaken Oscar. Now, I do understand that for most people, they would feel very opinionated and they would have strong feelings for the fact that Dear Basketball would actually win, and that is mainly for the factor of Kobe Bryant. And this is especially true for basketball fans. Rather, if you do like Kobe Bryant or not, I'm sure for basketball fans, they would feel something very strongly about the fact that Kobe Bryant is now an Oscar winner on top of his many different awards that he got during his basketball career. So, with all that said, yeah, like I said before, I am very glad that Dear Basketball actually did get the Oscar win this year for Best Animated Short. It really is something that is well-deserved, especially with Glenn Keane's beautiful animation. And on top of that, like, you do have a nice score by John Williams and also a very touching poem from Kobe Bryant about his love for basketball, and also that it is, in a way, a message about following your dreams and never giving up, because, like, you could start out as a kid who dreams of being something big, and then you do end up being something big, but it won't last long. And, like, in a way, this is Kobe Bryant's way of saying thank you for making a kid's dream come true. So, yeah, it is very touching, but this is not to undermine the other Oscar-nominated shorts as well. Lou is one of the more creative Pixar shorts. They did a very good job there. Definitely better than the movie that it presented with. And also, I do appreciate Revolting Rhymes. That is actually a really nice short, and it's a very good adaptation of Roald Dahl's book. Definitely a lot of fun. I would also say Garden Party is also worth watching, not just because of the hyper-realistic animation, but also that there is kind of a hidden story within it, and it does have some interesting twists and turns. So it's like the kind of short that it looks like you just see a bunch of frogs going around into some crazy shenanigans, but there is actually a dark story that's incorporated into it. So yeah, all these animated shorts, they did a good job, but I would say Dear Basketball definitely is the winner that did deserve it. So, with all that said, let us go ahead and now move on to Best Animated Feature. And probably nobody's surprised by this, but yes, Pixar's Coco ended up being the winner, where it managed to grab the award from the other nominees, which includes The Breadwinner, The Boss Baby, Ferdinand, and Loving Vincent. And for me, I would say that I am really glad that Coco won. And yeah, I know that there might be some people out there that could be a little bit upset because, yes, once again, like many years or most of the years during the Oscars when they have Best Animated Feature, it is a Pixar film that won. But honestly, with that said, I want to go ahead and ask you guys this one big question about Coco's win. And honestly, who else would have gotten it? Let's be honest, because for this year, Coco didn't really have much contest. You know what I mean? And I know I have already expressed my thoughts before regarding the other animated films that did get nominated this year. And yeah, like many people, I was a bit upset that out of all the animated films released, The Boss Baby and Ferdinand somehow got themselves a nomination. And I've already said my piece about those movies, and even to this day, I still feel like The Boss Baby and Ferdinand do not deserve to get that Oscar nomination, nor does it deserve to even get that kind of reputation. In fact, in a way, that Oscar nomination kind of makes things worse for those movies. Like, right now, it's starting to become this massive joke about the fact that The Boss Baby, out of all things, actually got an Oscar nomination. In a way, it's a lot like how people would joke about Suicide Squad last year, how that actually won the Oscar. Now, thank God The Boss Baby didn't actually win, but honestly, those films getting an Oscar nomination, it's more of a curse than it actually is a blessing. And honestly, if they did not get that Oscar nomination, then people would just move on, and honestly, things would be probably okay for those animated films. Like, they wouldn't have, like, this much backlash over it. You know what I mean? And on top of that, there is also the independent animated features, and we do have some interesting choices right over here. Well, technically, I've stated before that the entire list itself of the nominees is just a copy-paste from what happened to the Golden Globes, but we do also have The Breadwinner and Loving Vincent. Now, it's interesting to mention about Loving Vincent, because that one, I am highly aware that it does have a fan base that absolutely adores Loving Vincent. Like, whenever that subject or that movie would be brought up, people would fall in love with the movie. They would say it's like one of the best things that they have ever seen. And seeing the film myself, I will say that I do agree that when it comes to Loving Vincent, it does have some of the best animation and some of the most revolutionary animation in recent years, considering how literally every frame is a work of art. It's literally a painting. And the way that they have done it, it's actually quite incredible with the amount of effort that has been put into that animated film. However, as a film critic, one thing that I have learned about animated features is that great animation does not make a great movie. And that definitely is the case with Loving Vincent, because even though as amazing as the animation is in that film, the writing and the script, it's a little bit of a mess, to be honest. It really did need some work in there. And the thing with Loving Vincent, it's just that the story is a little bit messed up. It's confusing and repetitive. And also, it is so hard to find even one likable character in the film. Like, honestly, the best way to summarize the story of Loving Vincent is that you got this douchebag in a yellow suit who is asking other douchebags about what happened to this one mentally ill douchebag that killed himself. Yes, even Vincent van Gogh is pretty much a douche in this. So really, there's no likable character here. Everybody is kind of mean-spirited and a jerk to each other in a way. And also, on top of that, the story itself, like I just said, it is very repetitive but also confusing. There isn't a lot of answers that have been brought up, or there isn't a lot of questions that have been answered, is what I mean. And you can tell that there is this very specific formula that it would keep following again and again and again, where the dude in the yellow suit, he would ask someone about what happened to Vincent van Gogh. Then the interviewee would give the guy in the yellow suit something to drink. And then the interviewee would tell his side of the story about what's up with Vincent, or what that person knew about Vincent van Gogh. And this would just keep going on and on and on. And overall, like, I kind of realized that Loving Vincent, in terms of the story and the characters that have been brought up, it really is the poor man's version of LA Noire. So, yeah, honestly, I do understand why Loving Vincent deserves to get a nomination, but there was absolutely no way that it would win. But then you got The Breadwinner. And the thing with The Breadwinner is that that's probably the only film in that entire category that is actually legitimate competition against Coco. And the thing with The Breadwinner is that it really is a well-crafted film. The people at Cartoon Saloon and director Nora Twomey did a phenomenal job, or Nora Twomey, I would say. I think that's how you pronounce it. But anyways, they did such an incredible job with The Breadwinner. But I will say that experiencing The Breadwinner in general, it really is a 3-hour experience, because you need 90 minutes to go and watch the movie, and then afterwards, you need another 90 minutes just to recollect your emotions, because this is the kind of film that, even though, like, there are some happy moments in there, it will leave you as an emotional wreck. Like, I am dead serious. This is really such a heavy film. A really good film. But it definitely is the kind where I know a whole bunch of people who would go and watch The Breadwinner, and they will go, like, they will come out going, oh my god! Like, I know, like, with me, like, I just needed some time to just breathe after watching The Breadwinner. Again, very well done, but a really heavy film. So honestly, overall, with the Best Animated Feature category this year, really, it was just a competition between The Breadwinner and Coco. And honestly, with the way that the Academy works, it is extremely rare, or like, it happens only once in a lifetime, that they would actually recognize an independent animated feature or a foreign animated feature in general and give the award to them. In fact, honestly, the only 2 animated features that I can think of that are not from a major American animation studio would be Spirited Away and also Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit. And even that is a little bit iffy, with Wallace and Gromit, because technically that one was actually distributed by DreamWorks Animation. So, honestly, yeah, the thing is with Coco, like, is it really predictable that Coco won? Yes. But comparing to all the other movies that have been nominated, did it deserve it? Absolutely. I mean, for me, I feel like it was only a competition against The Breadwinner and Coco, but I am definitely glad that Coco actually did win the Oscar. But surprisingly enough, even though that Coco winning Best Animated Feature surprised no one, what Coco did to surprise people is actually winning its 2nd Oscar, and that actually is for Best Original Song. Now, Coco actually had some pretty tough competition there, and it wasn't easy to determine which one would be the big winner. Like, apparently, Coco's Remember Me was up against Mudbound's Mighty River. It was also against Call Me By Your Name's Mystery of Love. It was also against Marshall's Stand Up For Something. And it was also against Greatest Showman's This Is Me. And I knew that there were a lot of people that were pretty iffy regarding, like, who would be the winner. Some people, in fact, most people that I know, were pretty much predicting that This Is Me would actually be the big winner, considering that that's the song that pretty much is the big hit that you would hear on the radio all the time. And if I could be very honest with This Is Me, this is actually the first time that I've heard of This Is Me in general. Not like, I don't mean like this is the first time I've heard of the idea of This Is Me or anything like that. I've heard of it before, but I mean, like, to actually hear the song itself. The first time I did it was actually in the Oscars. And for me, I just feel like it's just, like, honestly, I don't see the point of that actually getting nominated, or actually getting nominated, like, throughout all award shows and stuff like that, because from what I've heard with This Is Me, it's just, like, your typical, your typical bland pop song where the theme is, like, oh, be yourself, be anything but normal, and all that kind of stuff. Like, a lot of people are trying to say that, oh, it is the anthem for weirdness, it is the anthem of uniqueness and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I'm just standing there thinking that Disney might have had several songs about being yourself and to stand out from the crowd, and those ones would be much better. Honestly, For me, there really isn't anything special about This Is Me, and considering that it is from the same songwriters of La La Land, it didn't really surprise me that it didn't come out that well, or the execution of it isn't really all that good. But overall, yeah, like with Best Original Song, there definitely is some stiff competition there. It was pretty tough. Like, there are some strong songs that really do encompass about protesting and to standing up for your rights. In fact, there really is one song that's literally called Stand Up for Something. And there's also another really good one, Mighty River. So, honestly, it was tough to really know, but I really am glad that Remember Me actually did win. And I could see how that it actually became a winner, because Remember Me is the kind of song that you can use it in any way you want. There are many different ways to interpret Remember Me, something that you can use it to be somber, you can use it as something festive, you can use it as something that's calming. Any way that you can use it, it actually does work. And I feel like with Coco, it really does work out well for the movie, especially the fact that it does play a key factor onto the film. So I really am happy that Coco actually did win for Best Original Song. So yeah, overall, there's not much of a surprise that yes, Coco did come out with an Oscar, but it really is nice that it is a 2-time Oscar winner. You know, it's always great to see an animated project coming out with more than just one Oscar from Best Animated Feature. That is always great to see. So, with all that said and done, let's go ahead and talk about the other winners outside of animation. And I might as well start things off by talking about the big winner, and that was honestly quite a surprise, which is actually Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. Now, honestly, I was shocked that it came out as the ultimate winner of this year's Oscars, considering that when you look at the previous years, where you look at the 2015 movies and the 2016 movies, you notice there is a little bit of a pattern where there's always that one movie that would win the most Oscars, but then you have the one small movie that would walk away with a few Oscars, maybe like 2 or 3, and then it would go out with Best Picture. Like, it happened with Spotlight, and it happened with Moonlight. But with The Shape of Water, I was expecting that would be the one that would walk out with the most Oscars, considering that it has a huge amount of nominations. And then right afterwards, you got something like 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, to be the one to walk out with Best Picture, along with Best Actress for Frances McDormand for her performance in the movie. Now, I was expecting that, but that isn't the case. In fact, The Shape of Water didn't really win as much Oscars as I thought. It only won 4 of them, where it actually won for Best Original Score, it won for Best Production Design, it won for Best Directing for Guillermo del Toro. That's probably the one that is the easiest to predict. And then it won for Best Picture. And honestly, I could not be more proud for Guillermo del Toro to actually get that. I really am happy for him, considering that I definitely am a Guillermo del Toro fan. I really do love his works, whether it be like the Hellboy movies or Pan's Labyrinth, or even like some of the animated stuff that he worked with DreamWorks Animation, where he was an executive producer for some films like Puss in Boots, Kung Fu Panda 2, Rise of the Guardians, and I definitely love Troll Hunters. That is such an awesome series right there. And I'm glad to see that he really is getting some massive recognition, and now his legacy is starting to become greater than probably what anybody could expect. Not only is he an Oscar-winning director for what he did with The Shape of Water, but now he's also known as a director for a Best Picture film with The Shape of Water. And I have seen The Shape of Water myself, and it really is such a nice movie. I actually got a press screening thanks to FilmBook, and it really is beautiful, and it was executed very, very well. Now, I know I could have a bit of criticisms with the movie where I feel like the story is a little bit like a little bit familiar, and it has been used before, and I do feel like there are some strong parallels with the Iron Giant, especially with the villain. But honestly, when it comes to The Shape of Water, it is very well done. It does feel like a powerful movie, and the performances are amazing. Like, I definitely do applaud Sally Hawkins' work for what she did in The Shape of Water, where it really required a lot out of her, considering that she has to be mute. Now, you think it would be a little bit easier because she couldn't talk. No, 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 no. She has to use her body in order to express how she feels, and trust me, like, you definitely can relate to her and feel where she is going with when she would meet up with the fish monster. So it definitely is a nice film and a great film. And yeah, like, you know, it actually is nice that it did win Best Picture. But on top of that, there are also a lot of big winners as well. Dunkirk actually walked off with 3 of them, where it won for Best Film Editing, and it won for both sound awards for Best Sound Mixing and Best Sound Editing. And yeah, I will admit that it did do a great job on it, but there is one thing I have to complain about with Dunkirk when it comes to the sound. My God, I remember seeing it back in theaters. It was loud. That's the one thing about Dunkirk, is that it was a very loud movie. Believe it or not, I had some warnings from my friends. So it may sound crazy, but I actually walked in wearing earmuffs. And yeah, some may think that, oh, when you wear earmuffs, you won't hear much of the movie. No, 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 no. With the volume of Dunkirk, they put it up to freaking 11, and I can hear just fine, honestly. Like, there were a few moments I wanted to test out, like, okay, like, what does it sound like? Okay, put it back in. I think I'll be okay with this. But yeah, no, like, they did a very good job despite the volume, but yeah, Dunkirk really did some great work in there in terms of some of its filmmaking. And then there is also, of course, Darkest Hour, where it got 2 awards for Best Makeup and Best Actor for Gary Oldman. So this definitely was a moment where Winston Churchill had a time to shine in terms of the performance by Gary Oldman, which honestly, his win is a little bit like Leonardo DiCaprio with The Revenant, where like Gary Oldman is one of those actors, like, he finally got the Oscar for Best Actor, and the public would just say, well, final freaking Lee, it's about time that he got one. And also for Best Makeup, to making him look like Winston Churchill, because Gary Oldman is not a large guy. He is actually pretty skinny, and then you see the images of Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour, and yeah, that was one heck of a transformation that they did there. And then there is also Blade Runner 2049, which I get the feeling that the Oscars is trying to say that apparently Blade Runner 2049 is the best visual-looking movie out there, since it actually did win not just Best Cinematography, but also for Best Visual Effects. Now, I will admit personally, I do feel like it is the most disappointing win in terms of the Oscars this year, at least for me. Because the thing is, for Best Visual Effects, I was really rooting for War of the Planet of the Apes. For me, War of the Planet of the Apes has to be probably my favorite movie of 2017. I'm already a fan of the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy, and the third one is absolutely phenomenal. Like what Toy Story 3 did to the Toy Story trilogy, War of the Planet of the Apes did to the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy. It really is phenomenal, very well written, and the visuals are absolutely phenomenal. They did such an amazing job in there. And honestly, it is a bit disappointing that it didn't win an Oscar or didn't get too much, like a whole bunch of recognition. At least it did walk away with the Annie. But I will say that I'm not going to complain too much about it. I'm not going to say anything, like, I don't have anything against Blade Runner 2049 because, I'll be honest, I have yet to see the film. And considering that it did win 2 Oscars, maybe it would be worth watching just to see what the visuals has done. but I do need to try to find the time for it though, because honestly, the thing is, I know for a fact that Blade Runner 2049 is a godforsaken long movie. I think it's even longer than Star Wars The Last Jedi, going, I think, like, I think it's, like, between 2.5 hours and 3 hours, so I probably would need to find the time, but then again, I think it would be important that I would check out Blade Runner 2049, considering that most of the visual effects are done in Montreal, and as a Montrealer myself, I do need to support my local visual effects artists and animators, you know what I mean? So, yeah, that is interesting. But there is actually one that I do have to mention that is probably the biggest surprise, and the biggest pleasant surprise, other than Shape of Water winning Best Picture. It would have to be Best Original Screenplay, which was actually given to Get Out by Jordan Peele. And Get Out was definitely a strong movie, and really overall, Get Out really was an unexpected surprise, because we're talking about a Blumhouse movie by Jordan Peele, and it came out with such a strong message related to race relations and all that stuff. And now we see Jordan Peele actually winning the Oscar. And you know, I mentioned not too long ago how Jordan Peele decided to be a full-on director and filmmaker and quit acting in general because of the poor treatment that Sony has given to him when offering the role of the poop emoji in the Emoji Movie. And yeah, honestly, it really is for the best, actually, considering that now Jordan Peele is a legitimate Oscar-winning filmmaker. And honestly, I could not wish him more the best for his filmmaking career at this point. It really is awesome to see Get Out actually walking away with an Oscar, and a big Oscar at that. We're talking about Best Writing over here, Best Original Writing per se. So honestly, that is a pleasant surprise right there. Other winners that we got, well, I will say that when it comes to the Best Actors and Best Actresses, those ones were really predictable. In fact, I would even say that it is possibly one of the most predictable Best Actor and Best Actress categories that I've seen in a while. And this is, like, some could even debate that it could be as predictable as Best Animated Feature, because like, you do see the patterns from other award shows, and yeah, like, you do end up with the same winners. Gary Oldman won for Best Actor for Darkest Hour. Frances McDormand won for Best Actress in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Sam Rockwell won for Best Actor in a Supporting Role for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And Allison Janney won for Best Actress in a Supporting Role for I, Tonya. Yeah, that is kind of predictable, and considering that when you see the patterns, of course it's going to affect the Oscars as well. But then you also do have Best Costume Design for Phantom Thread, which honestly, that one is another predictable one, because you're literally talking about a movie about costume design, so of course it would win the Oscar for costume design. I mean, it really does emphasize one thing, so it would fit into that category right there. Are there other ones? Honestly, I'm not too familiar with the live-action shorts or the documentary features, so I can't really put my commentary onto that, or even the foreign language film, so there's nothing that I can really say there personally, but yeah, I think, oh, well, technically there is also Call Me By Your Name for Best Adapted Screenplay. That is actually very nice, and considering how Call Me By Your Name is a big contender this year at the Oscars, it's not that surprising that that one would actually go ahead and win the Oscar. So yeah, I think we pretty much covered all the winners. Now let us go ahead and move on to the show itself, how things worked out on stage and with Jimmy Kimmel and all that stuff. Now, before I continue though, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a warning. Just to let you know, guys, that I will be discussing about some serious and some serious subject matter and talk about some social issues. I will be getting a little bit into some, excuse me, I will be getting into a little bit of political subject matter like sexual harassment, with gun control, and all that kind of stuff. I will be discussing about those things, so if you're not a fan of hearing anybody talking about politics or anything like that, then maybe it's the time that you can back off right now. And please take this warning for granted. Please consider this warning very well, because it is not every day that I give you guys a warning that I am about to express an opinion. And I mean, it really is sad nowadays that we have to do something like that. I mean, there are times when even I feel like in my reviews, I have to put out a warning sign saying, "Warning, I'm about to express my opinion on an animated film. Viewers' discretion is advised." Okay. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the show itself. And honestly, I would have to say that overall, I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't really do anything special. Like, honestly, this is more of your generic award show presentation. Like, honestly, with the Oscars, usually they would be known to really put on such a grand show. But in here, they didn't really do much. And honestly, I was a bit disappointed as well that Jimmy Kimmel didn't really do much as well. Like, honestly, last year, Jimmy Kimmel was absolutely awesome. He was definitely great and brought out one of the most entertaining Oscar shows in recent years. And we've had a blast, and he was absolutely hilarious delivering jokes about the recent films and slamming on Trump and the GOP and all that kind of stuff. Now, I will say with Jimmy Kimmel, of course, he is still funny this year, and he did have a lot of funny moments and some good jabs onto the GOP and stuff like that. But he didn't really do that much. It didn't really feel like he was really a host. It was more like he was just there. And of course, considering that he is a late night talk show host, of course you would have those little moments where there would be some late night talk show moments. Like, there's this running gag about a jet ski that if you would have the shortest acceptance speech, then you would actually go and win a jet ski. And then also, if there's also another one where some celebrities decided to go into the theater next door because there was a sneak preview for A Wrinkle in Time, and they decided to come in and give out some snacks and stuff like that. So, honestly, it was a bit underwhelming. Like, they did do the best they can with it. A lot of great jokes came out of there, especially one that I do remember that Jimmy Kimmel mentioned that, okay, instead of doing the little song, we're just gonna bring this guy in, and you see the guy from Get Out actually like just running in going, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" Like, admittedly, that was actually pretty funny and a great comedic use of Get Out. So that was definitely a lot of fun right there. But yeah, I will say that I was a bit disappointed that they really didn't do much, especially the fact that it is the 90th Academy Awards. That was a bit disappointing that they really laid low onto it. The only thing that they've done that really was special is just the montages. Like, you just see a bunch of montages for different movies. I mean, it was a little bit cool to see, like, different montages for Best Actor and for Best Supporting Actor and Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress and all that kind of stuff, but really, you could do that in any Oscars and it wouldn't be that much different. And really, the only thing that does emphasize that really does emphasize the fact that it is the 90th Oscars is that you got this, like, in the middle of the show, you got this one big montage showing, like, all the different movies that got recognized at the Oscars and stuff like that. So, really, it didn't deliver that much, and it was a bit disappointing. But I will say, I guess, there is a bit of a reason. You could argue that there is a bit of an explanation why they didn't want to make it so extravagant, and that is because they want to have a bit of a more, like, they want to have some time to mention about the social issues that are currently going on. One thing that is absolutely unavoidable is the movements against sexual harassment, like Time's Up or #MeToo, and all those things. Honestly, I was expected that they would bring that up a lot, but honestly, not really. Like, any of the social issues, like, they do get brought up a little bit, but at the most, they kind of got shout-outs, pretty much mentioning things that like any real American or any real mentally functioning human being would go and support, like fighting for feminism, pretty much standing up for the Parkland students to support them on their way, to have a demand for strict gun control, to take down the NRA and other far-right terrorist groups that would support mass shootings, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they would mention about fighting for equality, fighting for gun control, and fighting for all that stuff. They mostly just got a little shout out, and that's pretty much it, honestly. But there is actually, however, one moment, or actually a few moments where you subtly see some of the #MeToo movements spreading onto the show itself, like where it did actually get a spotlight. And probably one of the most significant ones is actually what they did for Best Actor and Best Actress. Now, what they did is that they actually broke tradition, considering that Casey Affleck decided to not present for Best Actress since he does have some scandal with sexual harassment accusations from his side, so he decided to walk away from that. So what they did, instead of doing the tradition of having last year's Oscar winner for Best Actor and Actress to present those awards, they actually brought in some veteran actresses. There was for Best Actor, I believe, for Best Actress, I forgot who it was. I really do apologize. But then you would also have for Best Actor, where they brought in Jennifer Lawrence and Jodie Foster. And honestly, it was actually very interesting seeing them, because honestly, I was a little bit confused about, is Jodie Foster really small, or is Jennifer Lawrence really tall? Because you do notice that there is a significant height difference right there. But then there is also one other big one that they do brought up the message about the #MeToo and Time's Up, and a little bit more. Actually, it's not really about that, but there is one thing in there, like a little moment where they discussed about equality. And that is probably the most memorable thing from this year's Oscars, where they would go and interview some people, and how in this day and age, in this age of cinema, we are starting to see a lot more people that are representing other groups than just straight white males. Where in terms of the stars of the movie and the directors and the writers and some of the positions that people look up to, now they can be represented by minorities, by women, by transgender people, and by anybody. Really, now there is a time for minorities to go and they can look up to. And probably the best, the two biggest examples that they actually used at this year's Oscars for that little moment, they brought up Wonder Woman and Black Panther, where they mentioned that not too long ago, it would sound insane to have a movie, or a superhero movie for that matter, that would star either an African American or a woman. And yet, here comes Wonder Woman and Black Panther. They dominated the box office. In fact, right now, Black Panther is one of the highest grossing movies ever. Already, as I'm recording this, I wouldn't be surprised right now if it hit $1 billion at the box office. It already crossed $500 million domestically. So from there, they mentioned that when women would watch Wonder Woman, they would feel like this massive connection that they've never felt before when watching movies. Or even with Black Panther, when other African Americans and other minorities, when they would watch Black Panther, they would feel a connection that they've never felt before. And they would say that, man, this is what white guys feel like all the time. And honestly, it really is inspirational seeing that, where there's more different, there are more people that other groups can go and look up to. And for me, as a straight white male, the way that I interpret that for myself is that, from what I see right there, that nowadays, when you would watch a movie and you would see a main character in a really good film, then at that point, a lot of the stuff about that main character, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about the character's gender. It doesn't matter about the person's race. It doesn't matter about the character's religion. And it doesn't matter about the character's sexual orientation. Honestly, a great character in a great movie is someone that anyone can feel relatable to. And there are a lot of movies, especially like the ones that are nominated at the Oscars this year, where I know I felt very relatable to, that I can relate strongly to. Like when watching The Shape of Water, even though I'm not a mute woman, I do relate to the main character there. Or even when watching Coco, I'm not a Latino, but I do relate to Miguel. Or even when watching The Breadwinner, I'm not a Muslim, but I do relate to the main character. I think her name is Parvana, I believe, but yeah, I do relate to the main character of The Breadwinner. Or when I would watch something like Moonlight, I do relate to the main character despite the fact that I'm not necessarily gay. So that's the thing. In this day and age, it really doesn't matter about race, about gender, about sexual orientation, or about religion. At the end of the day, people are people are people. And that's pretty much all that you need to go and relate and to feel empathy for someone else, rather it be in real life or rather it be in fictional. And it really does emphasize the importance of diversity, like the true power of diversity. Even though in that little clip in there, they would only mention about the power of diversity that we are seeing in cinema. But it also highlights the importance of diversity in our culture in general to really reach that equality, to really have that moment to shine, that anybody, literally anybody, can go out and achieve their dreams. And really, it really does highlight why diversity is a great thing and why pretty much nationalism is nothing more but a mental illness, which really does explain that when you listen to white nationalists, yeah, they're just crazy. They should never be taken seriously. So really, let nationalism die and let diversity thrive all over the world is pretty much what I got from this, and why diversity is such a great thing, really. So overall, it truly is kind of an inspirational moment from the Oscars, and pretty much the most memorable moment from there. So it is a beautiful thing to go ahead and check out. And maybe they do have a clip somewhere on YouTube about it, but yeah, if you haven't seen that moment in the Oscars, definitely go see that on YouTube. It really is quite a beautiful thing. And there is one more thing I would like to mention that I honestly was very surprised about, and that is actually the fact that they did bring back the stars of Bonnie and Clyde once again to present for Best Picture, which for me, I do find that was honestly kind of shocking, actually, because I guess they were given a second chance to come back because, yeah, we all remember last year's big incident where the wrong envelope was opened for Best Picture out of all things. So, one of the biggest accidents that ever happened in the history of the Oscars. But it is nice that they did come back to, make things up for old times. And they actually did get it right the first try. So that really was nice. So overall, honestly, not the most memorable Oscars. They do have some good highlights, but I will say in terms of the winners, there are some great surprises, and I just want to say congratulations to all the winners at this year's Oscars, and also a major congratulations to the team who worked on Dear Basketball with Glenn Keane, Kobe Bryant, John Williams, and the artists and animators who worked in there. And also for Coco, congratulations to Lee Unkrich, to Adrian Molina, to Robert and Kristen Anderson Lopez, and the entire crew at Pixar for another awesome Oscar win. And that is all that I've got for this week, so thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Animation Podcast. You can go ahead and find more of my work at film-book.com. All you have to do is search for Monsieur Brunet or the Animation Podcast. You can also find me on Twitter at AniMat505. Now, if you have listened to this podcast on iTunes or any other podcast service, do you mind doing us a little bit of a favor and rate and review this episode? That would be nice of you. And if you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, then hit that like button in our video and leave us a comment on your thoughts about the news this week. Tune in next week for the latest episode of the Animation Podcast and all things animation. Thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, see you later, dudes!